When you improve your middle game understanding, your results are sure to improve as well. So in this video, I'm going to share 7 of the most important middle game principles which all strong chess players know. Rule number 1 is to improve your pieces to better squares. When there's no tactical possibilities, this is usually the thing to do. Just improve your position little by little. Now, in many positions, it can be obvious what your worst piece is. But in positions like this one from Karpov versus Hernandez 1977, it's not so clear. It looks as though white is fully developed, so how can you improve your position further in a situation like this one? Well, Karpov, the great positional master, found a way, starting with bishop to h4. Now what this move recognizes is that back on g5, this dark squared bishop wasn't actually doing very much. It may look active, but what role is it really fulfilling? In order to improve it, it's going to h4 and then to f2, and once it gets to f2, it's going to create a threat on the black queen. So sometimes in order to improve a piece, it has to go backwards first, and this game is a great illustration of that. Let's see how the game continued. Queen to c5, bishop to d3. There are a few intermediate moves before the main point here, but eventually we see bishop to f2 from white. Now the black queen is attacked, and once it moves, bishop to b6. And if you notice, now the black rook and the pawn on a5 are forked, and white is going to win a pawn through this rerouting of the bishop. We'll just see how this plays out, because there are a lot of trades in between white eventually being able to win this pawn. Got very tactical, as you can see, but eventually, once the dust settles, white is a pawn up, and white went on to win this game. If you enjoyed that last example, then click subscribe to keep improving your chess. There's plenty more great content coming up in the pipeline from me very soon. Now on to rule number 2, which is all about worsening enemy pieces. To illustrate this, we're going to use Pit Shark versus Floor 1934. It's black to move here, and if you notice, there's an undefended pawn on h3, which black captured. Now what white should have done here was to follow the rule that I just introduced, to worsen enemy pieces. In this case, the black queen is very aggressively placed, and white should have played bishop to g2 to make that queen move away to somewhere less dangerous. Let's say the queen moves back to d7, and then the game would go on. Even though white has lost a pawn, white has got some compensation in the form of the bishop pair. But what white did instead, after queen takes h3, was to try to regain material by capturing on c6. Now this does win the pawn back, but it turns out that this black queen is now very difficult to get rid of, given that white missed their only chance to do so. Let's see how the game continued from here, because it actually only lasted a few more moves. Black played knight to d5. The threat is to capture the bishop, and then after white takes back, the g3 pawn will fall. So white looked to defend g3 this way by playing queen to e1, but you can see how white is having to go passive now. The threats kept on coming from black via f5. Black's next move, if given the chance, is going to be f4, and white's castle is just going to come under heavy fire here. White tried to create some counterplay to distract black from their attack, but black just ignored this threat, pushed on with f4 anyway. Another attacking idea from black is rook to f5, rook to h5, and checkmate somewhere on the h-file. A rather blunt plan, but actually a pretty difficult one to stop. And after white captured on e7, black didn't even bother capturing back, and instead captured on g3. Now, of course, there's not time for white to save their bishop or capture again because of checkmate on h2. And after knight to e3, white had to resign. So you can see the danger of not following this rule. When one of the opponent's pieces is aggressively placed, like this queen on h3 is from black's point of view, you need to get rid of it. Bishop to g2 would have done that and would have allowed white to continue the game. If you're a fan of my teaching style and you'd like to work with me to improve your results in chess, then I do work with a small number of ambitious adults through the Road to 2000 Chess Mentorship Program. Check that out by clicking the link in the description below. Now on to rule number 3. This is to do with contesting the open files. Sometimes in chess it's not about gaining an advantage, but preventing your opponent from gaining an advantage. Such as in the game Byrne versus Morosi, 1898. Black's last move was rook to g8, and that looks to take control of the only open file of the board. And what white should have done here was follow the rule that I just introduced, contest that open file by playing rook to g2. This way, if black initiates the trade, then now it's white who's got control over the open g file. And I think white is better in this position. But white failed to do this. Instead, white played rook to e1, a curious move, honestly, because it allows black the chance to invade on the g file and create threats. White looked to counterattack with rook c to e2. This is the idea, to try and win this pawn in exchange for this pawn. But black simply defended, and now white has got to go passive defending this weak pawn. I'll run through a few more moves of the game to see how this dominance of the g file worked in black's favour. So what we're going to see here is a bit of manoeuvring from both sides, but you can see that the black rook has now gone all the way from g8 to g1, getting in behind white's position. So rook to c1 check is now a threat. And tactically, this is the problem from white's point of view. This capture on c4, because if white takes back, then rook to c1 check is going to regain the piece. If you block, well, that's going to be even worse because you're going to lose the bishop this way and drop a pawn in the meantime. So that's why in the game, after bishop takes c4, white just captured a pawn of their own, but it all ends up working in black's favour. You can see this. And it all started by the invasion on the g file. Again, just run through a few more moves. White lost another pawn with check, and around about here we can leave it. Black is a pawn up and black went on to win the game. But it's not really the continuation so much as the initial mistake from white that I want to focus on here. In this position, when black had looked to take control of this open file, white should have claimed a fair share of it, and then white wouldn't have had any of the problems that he'd had in the game. Rule number 4 is to dominate the 7th rank. To illustrate this, I'm going to take a sideline from the game Smyslov versus Ribley, 1983. It's white to move here, and as you may notice, there is a black pawn on a5, which white could capture for free. But Smyslov didn't do this, and I think it's very instructive to understand why he didn't. Because Smyslov knew that the rook is actually perfect where it already is, dominating the 7th rank. Particularly in tandem with the strong knight on e5, there's quite a lot of pressure on the f7 pawn. And so Smyslov looked to amp up the pressure with the move rook to e4. Now let's take a look at what would happen if the queens are traded. Because now rook to f4 is coming, and there's not actually much that black can do about this. Bishop to d5, let's say. Well, black can't actually add an extra defender to this f7 pawn, which is now attacked 3 times by white and defended just twice by black. You can't advance the pawn either because it's pinned. And this plan is much stronger than grabbing the pawn straight away. And I think it's this kind of thing that really is the hallmark of a strong chess player. When you're starting out in chess, you're taught that material is the be-all and end-all. So whenever you see material that can be captured, that's what you go ahead and do. But when you understand these other positional considerations, that sometimes in priority to grabbing material, you can look to pursue other goals, well, that's when you know that your level is really starting to get high. Rule number 5 is to get your pieces ideally placed before making the key pawn break. The position in front of us here occurred in analysis inside one of my favourite chess books, The Art of Attack in Chess by Vladimir Vukovic. White to move here, and it's clear that white's attack is on the king side. And the way that you need to open lines is with the move h6. But if you play h6 straight away, it's not as strong as if you prepare it a little bit more first. And in a position like this one, where black really doesn't have any counterplay, white has time to prepare the h6 advance by playing rook g to h1 and queen to h2 first. This way, once h6 comes, it comes with a lot more force because white's pieces are already positioned ideally on the h-file. By the way, worth mentioning that as white was doing all of this, you might have been wondering, well, what would have happened if black had taken the knight? Well, in that case, white would recapture with the pawn, and this pawn actually cuts off a key escape square for the black king. Now, rook to h8 actually comes with the threat of checkmate. And do you want to know what black's best move in this position is? It's actually to give up the queen. So that shows how bad the position must be if that's the best move for black. But anyway, the main point of what I just showed you. Before making the key pawn break, get your pieces into their ideal positions first, if you have time. Rule number 6 is to always be on the lookout for favourable transitions to the endgame. A model game here is actually one of my own games, which I played online in 2025. Now, one move that black can play in this position is queen to f4 check. This is going to force the queens off the board. And if you were playing with the black pieces, you'd need to have a strong sense of whether this trade of queens is going to be favourable to you or not. Well, as it turns out, the trade of queens is favourable for black, and in fact it's the only winning move in this position. Once the queens are traded, the point is that black has got a passed pawn, and this is going to win the game for black eventually. If black instead avoids the queen trade with something like queen to f7, just defending this pawn, well then anything could happen. Maybe white gives a check on the 8th rank, and then another check here, which black can block, and then actually it would be up to white to decide whether the queen trade is favourable or unfavourable to white. And this is exactly the type of position that you could get with very little time on the clock, and it's hard to calculate the 10 or 15 moves that you might need to work out who promotes first. So you need to base it on these rules of thumb, like passed pawns, which pawn structure is easier to attack, because as it turns out, if white did trade the queens, then again, black would be winning. So as part of becoming a strong middle game player, it's important to study the endgame too, so that if you reach a position such as this one with the black pieces, you can confidently say that the trade of queens is going to lead to a winning endgame for you. If you're a high-achieving adult with ambitious goals in chess, then there is the chance to work with me through the Road to 2000 Chess Mentorship Program. You can check that out and apply to work with me by clicking the link in the description below. Now, my time is very limited, so please only apply if you're actually serious about this, if you've got the time and resources to dedicate to chess improvement. The types of clients I typically work with are doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, executives, people who've been successful in life and want to be successful in chess as well, those who don't have time to waste. If that sounds like you, then the Road to 2000 Chess Mentorship Program could be just what you're looking for. So click the link in the description below, fill in the application form, and I look forward to meeting you on the Road to 2000. Rule number 7 is to play with the initiative. This is a mindset that you really want to build into your game if you're going to become a strong chess player. Our model game here is Zeisel versus Waldhofen 1899, where it's black to move. In this position, black played bishop to d6. What this does is it gets the dark squared bishop off its starting square with a threat. The threat now is queen takes h2, checkmate. So white has to do something about this. The defensive move g3, and then black did the same thing next move, played bishop to g4. Again, gets one of the bishops off its starting square with a threat, this time against the white queen. And after the white queen moved, black was able to take advantage of the newly weakened light squares, which had become possible because g3 was provoked earlier. Bishop to f4 from white looked to take back the initiative by attacking the queen, but black actually just ignored the threat on this dark squared bishop and looked to bring their queen into h3 straight away. The point being, if this bishop is captured, then after queen to h3, there's no stopping checkmate on g2. Instead, white tried desperately to defend via knight to d1, but then queen to h3 anyway. Knight to e3 guards the mating square, but now after knight to g4, black's threats are too much. But pay attention to the mindset of those first couple of moves in the sequence. In the original position, it doesn't look too bad for white yet, but with the addition of a couple of improving moves, gaining the initiative, first bishop to d6, and then bishop to g4, white's position soon collapsed. That final game is one of the games that I shared in my series From Logical Chess Move by Move. You can click here to check out the rest of the game, including the build up to that position and what you can learn to apply to your own games and improve your own results.